happy to see you guys again. It's been a little bit. Hopefully with the talk that you've had with Shar about your diet and how the fats you eat, these different things that it can affect your heart health. And now looking at exercise, it can help you feel good about the changes you're already making. You know, a lot of you said you have challenges trying to stick with eating a certain way or even some of the supplements that you're taking, but every step that you take, even a small step, is going to make a difference towards building a healthier cardiovascular system. And like Shar was saying with some of the statistics, you know, this is a leading cause of killer in the United States for men and women over, I believe it's the age of 55. 1 in 4 people that die each year is from heart disease. And so obviously this is a real epidemic and a problem. And in Oklahoma, it's even higher than a lot of other places. We're on the top of the list for heart disease. So, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we enjoy eating, and sometimes our choices are not good choices, and sometimes we're not active. And so when I was looking at kind of which direction I wanted to take with cardiovascular health and exercise, I kind of want to look at some of these ways that exercise can lower your risk for heart disease so you can understand the importance of exercise, and then also some options on types of exercises that you can do. So can you guys think of some of the factors that could lead to cardiovascular disease? Does anybody think of what some of those factors might be? What are some of the biggest things that cause cardiovascular disease?
Eating a high fat diet, bad fat.
Right, especially like trans fats, things like that. Smoking. Smoking's a big one. So your diet or the type of food that you eat is a big factor. Smoking is a factor. Inactivity is a huge factor. Excess alcohol intake, being obese or being overweight even is a factor that leads to cardiovascular disease. And also, I think the only one I didn't get was diabetes, which you guys are learning a lot about how what you eat affects whether you're diabetic or how your body uses sugar and things like that. So obviously all of that's related. But what I wanted to look at, and the reason why I did this diagram is because it helps me to be able to explain it to you and understand how things work. So we're talking about lowering your risk of cardiovascular disease or even cardiovascular events like heart attack, stroke, and things like that. The first thing I'm going to look at is blood pressure. And the reason why that's so important is because the harder your heart has to work, the higher your blood pressure is going to be, and there's different reasons why that is. Whenever you exercise, your heart's a muscle. Like any muscle in your body, when you work it, it strengthens it. And it's the same way with your heart. The more that you work it, the stronger it's going to be. So whether you're doing physical activity, does anybody know what the difference is between being physically active and doing exercise? Does anybody have any guesses? If I say I'm going to do physical activity, what could that be? Anything that's physically active.
Walk the house.
Yeah, you can clean the house, or maybe you park back further and walk further. Exercise is more planned, and it has to be usually at least a minimum of 10 minutes if you're doing cardiovascular exercise. And so that could be walking, running, cycling. Physical activity could be raking leaves, cleaning, playing with your kids, playing with your dogs. So it can be a lot of different things. And so I want you to understand the benefit of both and why they're both important. And it also helps you to see there's lots of options. So when we strengthen our heart, and it pumps blood with less effort, and if your heart works less to pump, then that means that you're putting less force on arteries, which means you're decreasing the blood pressure. So my husband's in the oil field, and he understands pipes and pumps and all that stuff. That's something that I really don't understand that much about, but it's interesting because your heart is a pump, and then your circulatory system is like pipes. It's really all that it is. And so say my heart's pumping, and I decide that I'm going to make the opening to this pipe a little bit smaller. What do you think that would do to my blood pressure if I'm pushing more blood through a smaller opening? Does anybody want to guess? What will it do to your blood pressure? Yeah, it's going to increase it. Now let's do the opposite, because Shar just talked about rejuvenate, and she was talking about nitric oxide. Now imagine if I expand that artery or I dilate it, then what does that do to my blood pressure?
It lowers it.
It lowers it, exactly. And so exercise actually helps the inside of those I can't even say the word, endothelial cells, the inside of the artery. Exercise actually helps that to expand and helps it to be more flexible. And nitric oxide is what helps it to do that, which is what Shar was talking about earlier. So we can supplement, but we can also exercise to help our body to naturally produce that. So imagine if you're taking supplements, you're taking, you're working on eating healthy fats and a balanced diet, and you're exercising, you combine those things together, and obviously we're gonna get the most benefit. Could anybody here guess what the biggest reason is why this opening would become smaller in your arteries? What would cause that to become smaller? Cholesterol. And so that's actually the second thing that I wanted to talk about, but before I go into cholesterol, I liked this diagram other than the fact it was easy for me to draw because there were some really expensive ones. But basically it shows how, you know, your lungs are where you get oxygen, right? And it takes oxygen, goes to your heart. Your heart then pumps it through your arteries. Then they go up through the veins, back into the heart, and back to the lungs. That's why we have the blue and the red. So this is oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood. So now imagine that you gain 10 pounds of fat. Well, let's even say 5 pounds of fat, because, you know, I fluctuate up and down 5 pounds sometimes. Or maybe over time when you were 20, you weighed so much, and now you're 50 and you weigh 20 pounds more. What do you think your body has to do when you gain more fat? Because does fat need nourishment? Does it need oxygen? Yeah, it needs oxygen. So now let's imagine that we extend, so say we've got a strong heart, but we extend this circulatory system all the way out here. Do you think your heart's gonna have to work harder to pump to more capillaries? Right, because those arteries, they basically branch off into these little bitty capillaries, and when I gain more fat, I have to nourish it and feed it. And so when we're exercising and working on eating a healthy diet and we lose fat, how do you think that affects your blood pressure? Goes down. So there's a couple different ways you can lower your blood pressure. We can lower it by, like I said, opening that opening and also making that circulatory system a little bit smaller. Give your heart less to do. You know, and also strengthening the heart so that it can pump more blood at one time to get more oxygen. So to get into the cholesterol and how it affects it, because somebody mentioned that cholesterol can narrow those arteries. Another thing that can is calcium buildup. And Shirey knows quite a bit about balancing pH and what to do with calcium in your body if you have any questions. My sister had heart disease, and so at a very young age she had calcium buildup, and I had never really thought about how that affected your body or even what it was. But anybody over the age of 65 is usually going to have some calcium buildup in the arteries as well. And that makes those arteries where they can't dilate as much. And so you hear of people that have peripheral artery disease, right? And so their arteries are not as flexible anymore because calcium's hard, right? So they're not as flexible anymore. Or maybe they have peripheral artery disease because they have a buildup of plaque in their arteries. And so what I wanted to kind of explain a little bit, like what Shirey was talking about earlier with the different cholesterol. Got those stuck together. So you probably hear all these numbers when you get your test back in cholesterol, and it's like, what does that mean? HDL, LDL, VLDL. And I got a little picture here. So HDL is high density lipoprotein, and all you really have to remember is this is good protein. But it's actually kind of misleading when you say LDL or VLDL is bad bad cholesterol. And the reason why is, anybody know what your body uses cholesterol for? Anybody know? It helps for a lot of things. It helps to repair membranes in the body, which has to do with the arteries, but it also has to do with the transport and the production of your hormones. If anybody here has ever had thyroid issues or ever had not enough estrogen, progesterone, a lot of different things, it really affects your health. And so LDL cholesterol, they call it bad cholesterol, and the reason why is because when you get too much of it, or sometimes so they stick together, then we start getting that build-up. So you have to have some LDL cholesterol or you can't produce really important hormones. And so the difference is that, how I like to think about it, is your LDL and your VLDL are like transport trucks. The only difference between the two is that LDL is taking cholesterol to where it needs to go, and VLDL is taking triglycerides, like Shirey said. And so sometimes these trucks, they drop little pieces here and there, right? And so excess LDL is dropping the arteries because they're transporting cholesterol where it needs to go in your body to make important things. And so what your HDL does is it comes along and it picks it up and it takes it back to your liver. So Your HDL is like your street cleaners. Another thing that can happen is you can get a buildup of these different things. So say I get a buildup here, right? These trucks get in a traffic jam. The purpose of the HDL is to come along and pick up the casualties and clean up the debris. And so if you have a person that, say they have 150 on their cholesterol, and you say, well, that's pretty good. Well, like Shar said, if only 20 of it is HDL cholesterol, and the rest is your LDL or VLDL, it's too many acronyms here, then your body is not able to pick up the excess because there's not enough HDL or cleaners to pick it up. And so what exercise does is it actually increases your HDL cholesterol. And so maybe, I had a client who was on medication for blood pressure and cholesterol medication. The only thing she did was add exercise, which I obviously very firmly believe you need both to work on what you're eating as well as exercise. And we were surprised how much her blood pressure dropped and how much better her cholesterol was just by including exercise in her routine. And the only reason why she did that is she went to the doctor and he was like, you know, we need to do something. And so she started training with me. And so when you increase that HDL, it's going to help get rid of or prevent some of the clogging in the arteries from the other fats that aren't healthy. And I say that aren't healthy when you have excesses of them because they're important for hormone production, and that's why some of these cholesterol-lowering drugs aren't always beneficial if your cholesterol gets too low because you need it for hormones. So does anybody have any questions about that? I always feel like it's like Science 101 and you're going through so many different things. But, so I think that this analogy really helped me to think about why it was important to have HDL cholesterol, and exercise helps to increase that. So based on what we've talked about so far, we know that exercise not only increases circulation to keep the traffic moving, it also increases the HDL cholesterol to pick up the excess LDL or the packages, to take it back to the liver so then your body can use it. But it's also going to help increase the flexibility of your arteries so that you can get, like we talked about earlier, that dilation to get lower blood pressure. And so it's obviously beneficial for a lot of different things. So now imagine on top of that, you're eating a healthy balance of fats in your diet, like Shar said, to be able to clean up what you don't need on top of that. So all of that is related. It actually kind of goes along with a couple studies that I shared with you guys last time, if you guys got a chance to be here for that. We talked about cardiovascular exercise and peripheral artery disease and blood pressure. And just as a reminder, that study, it asked the question if it's just as beneficial to do one 30-minute session of exercise versus 3 10-minute sessions. And I don't know if any of you guys remember which was more beneficial. Does anybody remember, the one 30-minute or the 3 10-minute sessions? 3 10-minute. And the reason why was because, like we were talking about here, whenever we exercise, we're helping our body to basically produce more of that nitric oxide, and we're dilating those arteries. We're also helping our arteries to become more flexible. And so if I just do that once a day, I only get the benefits from it once a day. But now imagine if I did it 3 times a day. So say I do 10-minute walk in the morning, I do 10-minute one at lunch, and I do 10-minute one in the evening. You're spreading that out over time, and so they found that the individuals that did this study, that they had more flexibility in their arteries. I'm really not sure how they measured that. I'd like to know. I have to do some research. But they also showed that they had more stable blood pressure by doing those sessions over the day. So sometimes we feel like we need to exercise means we need to get out and work out 30 minutes or an hour a day. But according to this study, if you did some smaller bouts, 10, 15 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day, you could actually get more benefit, and maybe that fits better in your schedule. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that. They also found that walking and vigorous exercise are associated with substantial reductions in the incidence of cardiovascular events. And I think everybody here knows that exercise helps to prevent heart attack and stroke. But it's like Shar mentioned earlier, I think I've already lost it, but we're fooling ourselves if we think that that alone is going to fix the problem. It will definitely help, but when you combine that with healthy eating, just the benefits are going to be so much more. So that's the reason why exercise lowers our risk. The next part I'm going to look at just real shortly is basically what type of exercises do we need to do. So it makes sense that the harder your cardiovascular system has to pump, the more oxygen and the more blood you're going to get to your muscles. So if I just walk in place versus doing jumping jacks, do you think there's going to be a difference in the amount of blood I get to my muscles for all my cells? Definitely. And so a moderate to high intensity exercise is going to give you more bang for your buck. But can everybody do that because of limitations? Should you do that if you haven't been exercising? So maybe we need to start out slow to prevent injury, or maybe because of certain limitations we don't feel like we can do high intensity exercise. There's obviously still going to be benefits to it. Another benefit to doing the more intense or moderate intensity exercise is you're also going to increase your metabolism over the day for much longer. And so intense exercise creates the amount of oxygen your body needs, and the more oxygen your body needs, the more it's got to pay back later. And so you might, anywhere from 6 to 48 hours after intense exercise, your body will demand oxygen, which means it will need to metabolize more fuel, it'll have to replenish your energy stores, and you're going to have to reload the depleted oxygen stores, and all of that takes calories and takes fat. And so there are benefits to doing moderate to higher intensity exercise. Keep in mind that that doesn't necessarily mean running. You know, if that can be adding an incline on the treadmill can be higher intensity for you. So it could be doing strength training. There's a lot of benefits to strength training for your heart. You don't have to just be walking or running to get benefits to your heart. Strength training does as well, and I find I can usually increase people's intensity easier with strength training than I can with endurance exercise, because you get a certain point where you need to run, and not all of us can run. And so strength training is still a great option for that. But let's say that you've got to keep to a very low intensity workout. You're still training your heart and you're still demanding more oxygen. And so you're still going to get the benefit. And actually, they found that with low intensity training, or it could even be physical activity like cleaning, that for 48 hours after you did a low intensity workout, your body still continued to be sensitive to insulin, which means your body would take it in more easily. And so there's still benefits to doing some light walking, taking the stairs, or playing with your kids, your dogs. And then the last part, bonus it mentions about low intensity exercise, is that it temporarily prevents your body from making new fat, and they say that's due to the lower insulin. And so it is going to be some benefits for losing fat whether you do low or high intensity exercise. I would encourage you to try to get to that high intensity exercise where you have to breathe a little harder sometimes. Challenge yourself, but just do it at a rate that is healthy for you. And if you're not sure what that is, I'll answer any of your questions. As far as the recommendations go, it's 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity. And so that's the American Heart Association's recommendations. But recommendations are great, but our lifestyle is very dependent on what we can do. And I can tell you, like we talked about earlier with that study, 10 minutes a couple times a day is still very beneficial. So maybe you can't do that 150 minutes. Set your SMART goal at 10 minutes a day, or 20, or something like that, to get you started. So does anybody have any questions about the type of exercise or benefits? Anybody? Okay. So basically, to conclude, I just wanted to bring out that you can see, just looking at the diagram and what we talked about with the artery, how important it is that we have that bigger opening in that artery, whether that because we're exercising, because we're watching our diet, or because we're taking supplements to help our body work more efficiently. We're going to lower our blood pressure, and we're also going to lower the body's possibility for those plaques to build up, and all that's very important for your heart health. So hopefully from everything we've talked about today, like I said, you guys feel good about the changes you're making and realize that it's just small steps. So any change you make is going to make a difference. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yay.
Good information.
This diagram really helps, doesn't it? Kind of gives you a visual on what actually is happening and how things go put together. But that was excellent information, Shirey. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time doing that. All right, so we're just gonna wrap up here real quick. First of all, I do want to end with one particular thing, because there again, nutrition is so important. You need to understand that eating poorly does not have instant side effects. Eating poorly does not have instant side effects. What I mean by this is we can eat poorly and not feel the effects until it's time for us to be on a medication, or as our energy's gone, or we just don't feel like we used to. Okay? Many people have come into my store and I've consulted with over the years that all of a sudden they have this particular health issue. And then I ask them about what they're eating and they say, oh, well, nothing different than ever happened. And the mentality is, if it doesn't hurt you, if it doesn't kill you, it's okay. It's just we don't realize that all of the negative chemicals and whatnot out there that are being put on our food, they build up. They build up over time. And so that's why we need to start making changes right now for our cardiovascular health, for our microbiome, for overall health, for everything. But eating poorly doesn't have negative side effects for most of us. And I can tell you, as you do clean up, as you do some detoxing, some cleansing, you start getting back healthy, your body loves it. It loves it when you start treating it right. It recognizes it. And it will tell you pretty instantly if you go off the wagon, so to speak, and eat something you shouldn't. And that's, I mean, at first it's kind of maybe a little discerning. You know, I used to be able to eat that, now I can't. But the reality is you weren't supposed to be eating it in the first place, and now your body's communicating with you, okay? So that's what we need to keep thinking about as we go through this process. We make changes, we up our nutrition, we make sure that we're eating as clean as we possibly can, and moving forward into our optimal healthy selves. So eating poorly does not have instant side effects. So next week we are talking about sugar. Sugar is probably one of my most favorite modules to cover in this whole series. We just lots of information about understanding it, how it affects the microbiome, and all the different ways to find sugar in your labels. So we're definitely going to be plunging through that next week. And then last thing we need to do tonight now is go ahead and set our goals for the week. So page number 46 in your IN.Form participant manual. Make sure everybody does this before you leave tonight, okay? We need to write down 2 SMART goals. 2 SMART goals for today, for this week, okay? One of those goals based on your nutrition or your supplements or your water. Something to have to do with what you put in your mouth. Consider where you're challenged at. Are you getting your protein in within 1 hour? Are you getting protein throughout the day? Are you getting your 5 fats a day? Look at the things that we've been talking about tonight and see if there's somewhere in there that you could set a goal for yourself that's realistic, but yet time-bound for this week, okay? Your second goal that you're going to make this week is going to be your exercise goal. And don't just say more exercise. We want to know what you're doing. What is your goal? Whether it's more active stuff, you can get up in the morning and start dancing with your children, which is what I started doing. Having our morning dance off in the morning. It's a great way to start your day. Homeschooling moms all sweaty, just sitting down behind the desk going, okay. But seriously, find something you can do to increase whatever you're doing right now. I don't want you just writing exercise more. I want you to look at ways you can fit this in. If you have a 10-15 break in the morning and you got a break for 15 minutes, I'm going to take 10 of those minutes and I'm going to go walk. You know, or go up and down some stairs. You know, I mean, but yeah, you know, I mean, don't think of your break as, oh, I'm just going to go sit down. You know, do something. Use that 15 minutes that you have. Find ways to fit it in and put it together so you can get more exercise. So your number 2 goal, or a goal for the week, is to put something down for exercise. And of course, I want you to continue on your affirmations. If you don't have a solid verbiage on your affirmation yet, like Brenda does here, my thyroid is healing, then get your actual verbiage down, okay? Because that's something we're going to continue looking at as we go through this 9-week process, and we'll probably add another 1 or 2 as we go. So make sure your verbiage is clear on your affirmation. Does anybody remember the 2 best times a day to do that? Do your affirmation? first thing in the morning and before you go to bed. You go to bed and you repeat that affirmation in your brain. You program your cells. And so for the next 6, 7, 8 hours, however long you sleep, your cells are being programmed with that, my thyroid is healing. The cells have been instructed. Okay? And of course, first thing when you wake up in the morning, it sets the whole pace for your whole day. It really, really does. It helps you make sure that you're not thinking a bunch of negative stuff first thing in the morning too. That you get it focused right in the right direction. All right, so you're going to also read module number 5. You're going to work at getting more omega-3s into your nutritional plan each day. Make sure you look over those handouts I gave you so you can be aware of where you're going to get your omega-3s at. You're going to make sure that you're looking out for trans fats, hydrogenated fats, partially hydrogenated fats, and you're going to get them out of your house and not in your mouth at all. I challenge each one of you, if you go out to eat this week, okay? Ask them what kind of oil they use and if it's hydrogenated. I'm going to challenge everybody here tonight. I want to know next week who's going to do it and what kind of answer we're going to get.
I don't know. Let me go look.
Right. Seriously. Some of them will. We were in Woodward last week and we stopped at a place and it sparked a whole new conversation. I might have a client in Woodward. But I mean, just by asking the question, not that you guys are out looking for clients, but what I'm saying is that, you know, it really creates awareness. It brings awareness to people. You know, hey, I never thought about it. I don't know. What is it made with? That's a really good question. But I challenge everybody here tonight to ask somebody who's making stuff what kind of oil they're using. Even if you're going to a friend's house, what kind of oil are you using? Is it hydrogenated? Do you know? All right? I can't wait to see what happens. Also, I want you to make sure you look back on page number 43 and start incorporating some anti-inflammatory foods and spices in your cooking. Start using them regularly. The more anti-inflammatories you can put in, the better off your body's going to be and a lot happier. All right. So that's it for this week. I appreciate y'all being here. We're going to do our drawing as soon as we're done with the video here and see who gets to choose what they want. I want to thank you guys for your patience tonight. Have a wonderful, healthy week. And please stick around for our tropical smoothie that we're going to make.